Hey, how's it going? I'm Matthew, aka EZBOT, and today I'm going to show you how to make some advanced effects on the Octatrack. Now, these effects are only advanced because you have to know a previous concept that I've covered on this channel, which is live resampling. So as soon as you understand how to set up resampling on your Octatrack, and we're not going to be using a pickup machine, but resampling with flex tracks and how to do that live and how to get perfectly quantized audio so that you can manipulate it live and not have your audience know the wiser, then you can build these effects. So I'm going to show you how to do that concept quickly. Hopefully you'll pick up on it right away. It's going to take a little while, so you're going to have to bear with me. Once we get through that, then we get to go right into the effects. Live reverse. So this is going to be a 4-bar loop that you're going to be able to reverse live. And then we're also going to do a reverse echo freeze, which the timing for that you get to decide. And then we're going to do a pitch riser. So it's going to take your audio and be able to rise it up and still stay in time with your music. It's very cool. It's an awesome performance effect. If you want, we could take the pitch and decline it, so just the inverse. And then we're also going to do a modulation, which is a timing and pitch change. So it's kind of a transposition of your entire performance. And you can do this live. You do want to time these effects. We'll get into that a little bit later. But here we go. Okay, so we're starting with a blank project. I'm going to use a THRU track to do these effects. You don't have to use a THRU track. We're going to use one flex track and a master track to get most of this work done. It doesn't even have to have a master track, just a flex track, one flex track. But I want to have my incoming audio get affected by this effect on the Octatrack. So I'm going to use a THRU track, a flex track, and a master track. So let's grab our master track first. Let's go into our project and go down to Control, Audio, and select Master. And now our track 8 is a master track. So I'm going to go to that track and I'm going to turn the level up to 127 because I don't want any attenuated volumes. So what we hear is the actual volume of the incoming audio and or the processed audio on the Octatrack. Now I'm going to go over to track 1 just for sake of simplicity, and I'm going to double press source and I'm going to select a THRU track. I'm going to put down a trigger on this track so that the THRU track can activate. Hit yes, and now my THRU track will function. I'm also going to turn its level to 127. So what we hear, again, is not attenuated. Now I'm going to select inputs A, B, and inputs C and D. You can hear that I had a sample playing on my Digitact that whole time. And now I'm going to turn their volume up to plus 63 on them both. And that's just because the Octatrack's engine inside of it, the software inside of it, takes the volume of incoming audio and samples down 12 dB, and so I'm bringing it back up 12 dB so that it sounds identical to what would be coming from my Digitact in my Octatrack. Okay, so that's all we have to do here. Okay, now let's move over to our flex track. Just by habit, I always put this flex track on track 7. These effects come from my Performance Template 2.0, which you can find on my Patreon or my Ko-fi page. I'll have a link to that in the description of the video. But you can also just learn how to build all this stuff from my channel and the tutorial videos I provide there. We're going to go ahead and hold function and hit pattern. I want to go into pattern settings. I want my scale mode to be per track. This is just how I like to work. So now I can change the length of all these tracks. And then I'm going to go ahead and go into function plus page. We're going to scroll down to master. I'm going to turn this master up to 64. I'm holding function, turning the level encoder, it moves in steps of 16. And then I want this track length to be 64 steps. Now it doesn't have to be 64 steps. This is just so you can capture 4 bars, which is 64 steps. Again, turning the track level volume up to 127. If you're going to put static tracks on your Octatrack, you can put any volumes that you want. If you're trying to do these kind of effects tricks, you are going to want to always have your volume of your tracks at 127. You're going to have volumes that don't match. I know I keep talking about this. I do on all my videos. It's really important. It's kind of the missing ingredient to performing a lot of these effects. So the next thing that we're going to do is turn track 7 into a flex track. So you could either double press track 7 and hit left and select flex, or we can double press source and scroll down and select flex. Hit yes. Now we have a flex track. I'm going to assign this flex track to recording buffer 7, which is the recording buffer that is actually already assigned to track 7 in the background, so to speak. So now we have to make a scene for our live resampling. We have to set up a couple of recording settings so that we get a 4-bar loop and we can activate it whenever we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go into our record settings. So function plus record one. And what we want to record is our through track. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect these, and I'm going to select track 1 because that's where we put our through track on. And then we're also going to change the record length to 64 steps so that it stops at exactly 4 bars. And while we're in this menu, we're actually on our record trig editor. So this isn't actually a step editor for playback triggers. This is a step editor for record triggers. I'm going to go ahead and put one down on step 1, and I'm going to hold function and hit that step, and now it's going to be what is called a one-shot trigger, which requires activation for it to function. So how you activate it is either by holding the track down and hitting yes, or by default, you just hit yes and it activates all one-shot triggers on your Octatrack unless you've turned that function off in your settings. Okay, so now we're ready to get some recordings going, and just to demonstrate that we're actually able to record at this point, I am going to hold track 7, hit yes, it says ARM record track. Here's my audio editor. I'm going to go ahead and go into my MIDI settings and turn on send transport and send clock. Okay, now that I have clock transport, all that stuff set up, I'm able to do a perfect 4-bar loop. So I'm going to hold track 7, hit yes, and we're going to record a 4-bar loop. Okay, perfect. So it didn't play back, and that's because we don't have a playback trigger, but we don't want it because it would have been a double of our audio, and it would have sounded terrible, and it would have been loud. But we can audition it real quick so you can see that it did exactly what I said it would do. We've got a perfect 4-bar loop. Okay, so this is that principle I was talking about. You need to understand how to build what we just built, which is perfect quantized looping, and there's one last segment to it, and that is making it so all we hear is the recording. This stuff keeps playing, but we listen to this recording, and we're able to switch over to it silently without anyone knowing that we switched over to a recording. So to do that, we're going to build a effects scene. I usually use 16, which is labeled all, which means a recording of all the things. So I'm going to go to effects 16 here, scene 16. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hit these tracks. So I want track 1 to turn down. So I'm just going to turn the encoder down here. We're going to turn all the tracks down, except for track 7 and the master track. Now track 7, we're actually going to lock in the volume at 0, and then we're going to turn that volume all the way down to -64. Okay, so what's happening is that that track is always at 0 volume. We don't want to do the min-max level with track 7, so don't even ask. We're using the amp volume for this. We want that track volume to be at negative value so that it's unhearable, and then when we move to this scene, it brings that volume up, and all the other sounds fade out, and we're just listening to a recording. But now we got to put down a playback trig, so let's go ahead and just go into our step editor and put down a trig. And that is that. So here we go. We can fade over to that recording, which we just did. I can prove it to you. Okay, so you already get the idea here, right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this scene and we're going to augment this scene to create the effects that I was talking about in the beginning of this tutorial. So let's start off with reverse. So I'm going to go ahead and put reverse on 4 because that's where I usually put it in my template. So I'm going to copy the scene, holding the scene down, hitting the copy button and or the record trig, go into scene 4, pasting it with the stop button. So now what we're going to do reverse, this is a very simple effect, has to have a recording first. But what we're going to do is with this scene, we're going to go into our source menu and we're going to turn the rate to -64, and here we go. There you go. Pretty sick, right? So now we have a live reverse, and you just have to hit yes while you're playing. You just hit yes, and it will arm your record trigger. Play with stuff, maybe bring in some new elements. So there's that recording, here comes that new element. And then here's that reverse. All right, so you get it, right? So now the next one we're gonna do is the reverse echo freeze. This is a pretty simple one, but we do need to use a delay in freeze delay mode. So we're gonna do that on either track 7 or track 8. It's really not gonna matter, but let's just go ahead and do it on track 8. I'm going to go to Effects 2, double press Effects 2. I'm going to turn Lock on. I'm going to turn Tape off because I don't like to use it for these effects. We could turn Ping Pong on. It's a nice sound. And what we're going to do is turn that send up to 127. Now, the reason we're using 127 is because what I want is that when this encoder reaches the very end, which is 127, it's going to engage a freeze. I don't want it to engage in the middle. I don't want it to engage here. I want it to engage here. Only when it hits the very end. That's important. And that's why we use 127 for this. And now what we're going to do for this effect, first we're going to copy it. We're going to go to, we'll go to 2. And now what we're going to do is bring this send down to 0. So now it's going to reverse and then freeze. And here's what we got so far. Okay, it's not enough, and that's because we don't have the feedback turned up. So now what we're going to do is just turn the feedback all the way up. And we can choose the amount of time. I like to do 32 and 16 for these, but let's start with 32. And if we want, we could have it filter out. So we could use this low pass filter. That's the width command there. So that's a reverse echo freeze. I guess I also taught you how to make the echo freeze. Just do that, but don't do it on a reverse. Just do it with the delay. So pretty simple. Maybe I'll do another video on it. Who knows? Who cares? Okay, moving on. So that's reverse echo freeze. You mess with the parameters. Now this next one's a little bit tougher, a little bit more interesting, and this is a pitch riser. This is a dope effect. Okay, so here's how we're gonna do the pitch riser. We're gonna, again, go over to this scene. We're gonna copy it. Let's just go ahead and go to 8, just for fun here. And here we're gonna use the LFO. So let's go to the LFO on track 7, because we're gonna be using the recording, right? This is based all on the principle of recording a loop of audio. We're gonna go over to our LFO. I'm gonna double press LFO to go into the LFO parameter selector, and we're gonna just use the first one. It's already set to pitch, and that's what we want. Now we're gonna change this waveform to a upwards ramp. We're gonna use the 1x multiplier, leave the depth at 0 for now, because we're gonna adjust that, and then we want our speed to be at 16. So when the speed is at 1x and at 16, it's moving at 16th notes. So it's going to take all 4 bars for it to reach its end of its LFO phase, which is also good to know when you're designing other effects. Now what we want to do here is change this trig to trig, which means that this LFO will reset its phase at the beginning of every trigger. We only have one trigger on this track, so it's going to reset just the one time. Okay, now what we do want to do is go ahead and go into our source setup and turn time stretch on to rate. Okay, so we don't want the rate to change the pitch now. We want the rate to change the actual time stretching algorithm. So also we want to make sure our time stretch algorithm is actually set to normal instead of auto. So auto will kind of guess for you based on some of the parameters that you have on your Octatrack. It'll either do a beat version, which is good for transient preservation, or it will do normal, which is better for pitch preservation in the time stretching algorithm. So there's 2 algorithms in the Octatrack for time stretch. Just keep that in mind. So that's almost it. We need to assign a couple things to the scene. Let's go ahead and hold down this scene. Use my other hand here. We're gonna go into the LFO, and we used LFO 1, so let's bring the depth up. This is relative. You choose what depth you want it to be. If you have it go up all the way, it's gonna bring the pitch up really high, but it's gonna preserve the beat, which is good. So let's just try it at a smaller amount. Let's do like, at about 12 o'clock. Pretty sick, right? So you want to time this to the 1 of the beat. So here we go. You could do stuff like do that right into the echo freeze. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so now you can do that. You could actually reverse it too if you wanted. You could have it go down in pitch if you wanted by inverting the ramp. So you could have this go to a downwards ramp. see that it's moving at the right rate. Pretty sick. All right, so there's pitch decliner and pitch riser. Now the last effect I'm going to show you is just a modulation, and these are just pretty much the same thing that you were already doing. And this is a really fun trick. I like to use this effect. I like to use a tape stop into this effect. I'm not going to show you how to do tape stop. I already got a video on that on my channel. Always gets a cheer, and people are just impressed by it because it's always a resampled new version of your live performance, and it sounds cool. All right, so here's the modulation. Again, we're just going to copy this 4-bar loop version that we're basing all these effects on, and let's go ahead and put it in this 1/5 because that's originally where my modulation one is. Now for this one to work, we're actually going to use pitch, and we're going to bring it down about 5 semitones. Here we go. You can also adjust the rate with it, so you could bring the rate down to 48 and the pitch down 1/5, and you get this. And this is actually what I like to do for my performances. So you want to time them. So you can use different effects to jump into that modulation. So like the reverse echo freeze is a good one, or the Daft Punk effect, or just any sort of like quarter note, half note looper is gonna work really well. Or you can just slide right into it. So that's what I wanted to show you today, some advanced Octatrack effects for live performance. You can do this with tracks that you have already on your Octatrack. You can do this with external gear. You can find these effects in my performance template so that you don't have to go through the headache of building them all, plus also get a whole bunch more because there's 64 effects in my template, and you can reverse engineer the ones that I have on there. If you have any ideas for effects, or you want to see if the Octatrack can do other things that I haven't thought of yet or I haven't implemented into my performances, would you go ahead and leave a comment on this YouTube channel, please. Also, like the videos, subscribe to the channel, help me elevate my channel so more people see this and they get to learn more about this cool stuff Electron makes, and trying to take these pieces of gear to new levels of dopeness. So anyway, join my Patreon, like and subscribe the video, get my template, join the Discord, hang out with us, shop at Patchworks, buy Modbang cables. What other advertisements can I give you at the end of the video? I don't know. I can't think of any more. Feed your plants. Water your plants. This is a real plant. It's alive. This little guy. Okay, bye.